In the previous video, we discussed in detail the process of visual perception. In this video, we now turn our attention to auditory perception. Before we discuss how our brain processes sound, we first need to explore a few different properties of sound itself. Sound is a vibration that travels through a medium, such as air or water, via compressions or waves. Sound waves have an amplitude or height, which is measured as the distance between peaks and troughs. Sound waves also have a frequency, which is how short or far apart the waves are spaced. The frequency is measured as the distance from either peak to peak or from trough to trough. Both the amplitude and frequency of sound waves can affect different properties of sound that we perceive as loudness, pitch, and timbre. Perhaps the first property of sound that we notice is simply how loud it is. I remember the first time I was on campus when I heard Skipper, the Corps of Cadets cannon, being fired, and it was pretty loud. The loudness or intensity of a sound is measured in decibels and is related to the sound wave's amplitude. The sound of a whisper is around 40 decibels. The sound of a rock concert is around 100 decibels, and the sound of a jet plane taking off, if you were standing right next to it, is around 130 decibels. Sound starts to feel uncomfortably loud around 110 decibels, and it feels downright painful around 130. Sounds any much louder than that can cause irreversible damage to your ear, so it's important to protect yourself from loud noises. In addition to noticing how loud or soft a particular sound is, we can also detect its pitch, that is, how high or low the sound is. Whereas the loudness of a sound is related to its amplitude, the pitch of a sound is a direct result of the wavelength or frequency. Higher sounds have shorter frequencies, that is, shorter wavelengths, whereas lower sounds have longer wavelengths. The pitch or frequency of a sound is measured in hertz, or the number of cycles per second. Humans can hear frequencies in the range of about 20 hertz up to about 20,000 hertz, although our ability to hear high-pitched sounds declines as we age. Other animals are sensitive to different ranges of frequencies. The hearing range of dogs is estimated to be around 67 hertz up to about 45,000 hertz. Dogs probably can't hear frequencies quite as low as humans can, but they can detect very high-frequency sounds, called ultrasounds, that can't be detected or heard by humans. By contrast, elephants can hear at very low sounds, called infrasounds. If you play a musical instrument, you might know that different pitches or frequencies correspond to different musical notes. For example, middle C, the middle key on a piano, corresponds to about 262 hertz. Some people have an ability called perfect pitch or absolute pitch, which is the ability to correctly identify a note or frequency without the benefit of first hearing a reference note. Imagine two people, one playing the piano and one playing the guitar. Let's imagine that both play the same note, like middle C. Further, let's suppose that both the piano and the guitar play the note at roughly the same loudness or intensity. Although both instruments are playing the same note, that is, they're playing the same frequency or pitch, and at close to the same decibel level, you could probably still tell the notes would sound a little different. That is, it would still be clear which sound was coming from the piano versus the guitar. In addition to its sound's loudness and pitch, we can also talk about the quality of sound, such as whether it is more bright or dull or harsh, etc. The quality of sound is called its timbre, and it's why two instruments playing the same note at roughly the same intensity can still sound different. The timbre of a sound is the result of overtones. Different overtones are more or less prominent in different voices and instruments, which you can see shown in the graphic on this slide. These different overtones lead to differences in the quality of sound for each instrument, even when they are playing the same pitch. Now that we have talked about different attributes of sound, such as its loudness, pitch, and timbre, we can begin exploring how your brain actually perceives those different attributes. First, sound waves enter through your ear, the primary sensory organ of your auditory system. The pinna, or outer part of your ear with all its folds, is designed to help capture sound waves in the air and direct them into your ear canal. The fact that you have two ears is also pretty helpful, as it helps your brain to localize where a particular sound is coming from. This is because your brain can compare slight differences in the timing of when a sound hits your left ear versus your right. The sound waves from a noise coming on your right side, for example, will reach your right ear slightly sooner than your left. After reaching the pinna, sound vibrations travel down the ear canal, eventually reaching your tympanic membrane, which is also sometimes commonly referred to as your eardrum. The tympanic membrane is a thin, circular piece of tissue that measures about 1 centimeter in diameter. When sound waves reach the tympanic membrane, they cause it to vibrate. These vibrations from the eardrum then travel to 3 tiny bones in the middle ear, the incus, malleus, and stapes. Because of their shape, these bones are also sometimes referred to as the anvil, hammer, and stirrup, respectively. They also happen to be the smallest bones in your entire body. These bones help amplify the sound vibrations and channel them into your cochlea in your inner ear. The cochlea is a spiral or snail-shaped organ filled with fluid. When sound vibrations reach the cochlea, they cause the fluid inside to vibrate. In turn, this moves special hair cells on the basilar membrane, which sits inside the cochlea. Some of these hair cells form synapses that are connected to your auditory nerve. When these hair cells are stimulated by the sound vibrations in the cochlear fluid, this causes them to in turn vibrate, which can then start an action potential. This starts the process of transduction, where mechanical energy from sound waves is transformed into electrical signals that can be processed by your brain. In this module, we won't talk much about your vestibular system or how your body detects motion and helps you to maintain balance. However, it's worth quickly noting here that the hair cells and fluid in your cochlea are also used in that system too. For a video that explains both your auditory and vestibular systems in more detail, you can check out the supplemental crash course video on Canvas. Once inside your brain, auditory information is sent through the thalamus and ultimately to the primary auditory cortex located in the temporal lobe for processing. Some individuals with hearing loss choose to wear something called a cochlear implant, which is an electrical device that essentially creates a new pathway for mechanical energy from sound waves to reach the brain. The person wears a sound processor on the outside of their ear that sorts incoming sounds. The sound processor then sends these signals to a transmitter, which converts the sounds into electrical impulses, just like the hair cells in the cochlea normally would. These electrical impulses are then sent to electrodes placed inside the cochlea, where they can then stimulate the auditory nerve. There are two main theories as to how your brain perceives pitch. The first theory, temporal theory, proposes that hair cells fire action potentials in direct proportion to the frequency of a sound wave. The faster a hair cell fires, the shorter the frequency and thus the higher the pitch. There is some evidence that this may be correct up to about 4,000 hertz or so. However, beyond this point, individual neurons can't fire fast enough to keep up with higher frequencies. For that, we need a different mechanism, and this is where place theory comes in. Place theory proposes that different portions of the basilar membrane are sensitive to sounds of different frequencies. More precisely, the base of the basilar membrane responds best to high frequencies, and the tip of the basilar membrane responds best to low frequencies. Thus, the place on the basilar membrane that is stimulated helps your brain to detect the pitch of the sound. In this video, we covered the auditory system. For the exam, you should be able to describe the key properties of sound, loudness, pitch, and timbre, name the key structures of the ear, describe how sound waves are transduced into neural signals that can be processed by your brain, and name and describe the two major theories of pitch perception, temporal theory and place theory.